Testing. Say meow. We got to test the microphone, Luna. Well, at least say hello to the camera. Hello, camera. And I'm falling asleep because it's nap time. All right, well, I guess you could just fall asleep right here. If you live in America, you're probably sick. And while there's an unending list of reasons as to why that might be, the US government poisoning you might be one of them. Okay, now I come from a public health background with an expertise in policy and nutrition, so I'm not one to come to the internet to fearmonger or be an alarmist. In fact, I try to come here to debunk myths and correct some misinformation. And I hear a lot of chatter nowadays about is the US government poisoning us, and I really want to be a part of the conversation. And while I'd like to give the United States the benefit of the doubt and say, well, they're trying their best, there are a few questions I need to explore a little bit. Like, for example, why are Americans, despite living in one of the wealthiest nations on earth, increasingly sick, overweight, dependent on medications? Why do we, as America, the whole America, why do we spend the most on healthcare out of every nation in the world and yet rank near the bottom on every single health outcomes among developed countries? It very well might be that the government tasked with protecting our health has, for decades, made policy decisions that systemically undermine it. That the food system designed to nourish us has been engineered to prioritize profit over public health. That we are, in effect, subsidizing our own destruction. Today, we're going to be delving into how US agricultural policies shaped what Americans eat, how these very policies benefit industries rather than us, the people, and how regulatory agencies that are meant to protect us have been captured by the very industries they are meant to regulate. And this isn't conspiracy. A lot of people have been chit-chatting about it online. In fact, that one video I posted on TikTok that landed me on NBC News, one of the top comments was that the US government is poisoning us. Thousands of people commented that, along with the new American dream is to leave America, which I promise one day I'm going to put on a shirt because a lot of you liked it. But, anyways, so there seems to be this unanimous belief that the US government is poisoning us. And the United States food system is not a secret, it is a complex web of subsidies, regulations, or lack thereof, corporate influence, and lobbying. But we can clearly track that throughout history, which we're going to do a little bit of in this episode. And so, without further ado, let's talk about what we really mean when we say the government is poisoning us. And there's no better place to start than with agricultural subsidies. I don't know why I'm so excited to talk about agricultural subsidies. I feel like no one here in Qatar wants to hear about it. So anyways, hi YouTube. Since the 1930s, the United States government has been providing financial assistance to farmers. This was originally part of the New Deal to protect small farmers from the Great Depression. And that sounds noble, right? Right. But the thing is that the subsidies nowadays bear very little resemblance to what they did originally. And when we talk about agricultural subsidies, we're talking about the financial assistance that government provides to farmers to stabilize food prices, keep food production running smoothly, and keep the whole industry really afloat. It also includes agribusinesses as well, not just farmers. And that all sounds great, right? Kinda. There's a catch, because I mean, the US government doesn't do anything out of the kindness of its heart, but that's a whole other story. These subsidies overwhelmingly favor crops like, can you guess? Drum roll, please. I don't want to mess with the mic. I don't know how that my tech person isn't here. Um, can you guess which crops? I hope you guessed. I feel like I'm on an episode of Dora. I'm like, can you guess? Anyways, corn, soy, and wheat. There are two others, cotton and rice, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about the top three: corn, soy, and wheat. And as you may know, these three ingredients are pretty much in everything we put in our bodies, from cereals to turkey from the deli section to our bread and more. In 2022 alone, the United States spent over $20 billion in agricultural subsidies. So, where did all this money go? That's a great question. I asked it too, and I had to do a little bit of digging, but I finally found the answer. Approximately 75% of all of this money goes to the five crops I mentioned earlier: wheat, soybeans, corn, cotton, and rice. 5 billion alone goes to corn, and this, again, remember, is just in 1 year, in 2022. And the kicker is that only 1% of that $22 billion went to fresh fruits and vegetables, the very foods that nutritionists and sometimes government entities tell us to eat in abundance. And I mean, I know Americans lack nutrition knowledge, not by our own fault because we were never taught, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we should be eating fruits and vegetables. But what happens when they only receive 1% of government subsidies? Well, it discourages farmers from growing fruits and vegetables. And so farmers would rather grow something that the government is subsidizing. Therefore, the price of fruits and vegetables increase and the price of soy, corn, wheat, cotton, rice decreases significantly, especially corn. So let me give you an example. One US dollar can buy you 1,200 calories of potato chips. But if you were to go use that $1 to buy fresh potatoes, you can only get around 250 calories, which is a drastic difference. So with people on a tight budget, it becomes more of an economic decision rather than a nutrition decision. So, simply put, most Americans can't afford to eat healthy, even if they were equipped, which they're not, with the nutritional information they need to make informed decisions and weren't bombarded by propaganda from every which way. They still couldn't afford to eat clean. This makes clean eating, and I put clean in air quotes, healthy eating, nutritious eating. This makes it a luxury and a socio and something related to socioeconomics rather than choice. And this isn't accidental, it's not a big whoopsie. Large agricultural businesses have lobbied in billions of dollars to keep this exact system in place. Okay, but surely these crops like soy, wheat, and corn aren't making us that sick, right? Wrong. These crops aren't being used to fill the shelves with fresh corn on the cob or whole wheat bread. Instead, they're being used to make stuff that's even cheaper and worse for us, like hydrogenated soybean oil, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, sorry, my mistake, and, well, ultra processed white bread, fairy bread, poison bread. Sorry, I don't mean to demonize bread. I love bread. I eat it. I'm Palestinian. I live off of bread. It's in my veins and bones. But this bread, I'm gonna put a picture right here. It's not bread, mate. I don't care. It's not bread. Okay, sorry, that was a tangent. I was getting to the point that this is all, it's not benign, right? Ultra processed foods have been directly linked through an abundance of research to chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, the whole list of cardiovascular diseases, some cancers, autoimmune disorders, allergies, sensitivities, and the list goes on and on and on. But despite that, in a 2021 study published in JAMA, we found that American adults consume about 60% of their calories from ultra processed foods, essentially junk food. And that is more than half of what they put in their bodies. Of course, we're going to be the sickest nation in the world. Okay, we're not the sickest nation in the world, but relative to how much we spend, we're much sicker than we should be. But it's all by design. Can the mic even catch that? I don't know. If it didn't, I said it's all by design. In a nutshell, our tax dollars are going to making unhealthy food cheaper and healthy food air one level expensive, as though we needed another reason to be mad about where our tax dollars are going. But speaking of government shenanigans, right now we're going to be covering the FDA. When it comes to the things we add to our food, you might be thinking the Food and Drug Administration is surely protecting us from all the harmful ingredients, right? I'm sorry, wrong again. You see, the FDA operates under something called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. This is a designation that allows food manufacturers to self-determine whether the ingredients they add to their food is safe without FDA review. Conflict of interest? I think yes. I don't know if you just heard that crying child. That was a really loud crying child. Anyways, so this whole grass system, this system has led to over 1,000 ingredients being added to our food without FDA oversight, many of which being banned later on because we found research that backs the fact that they're harmful. For example, artificial trans fats were banned in 2018 because research found that they were causing 20,000 heart attacks annually. Annually. Food dyes are another troubling example. So, the European Union generally requires food manufacturers to have warning signs on everything that contains food dyes, but America just lets it pass. So, red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6 are all in our food willy nilly, everything from cereals to candy bars to the drinks we consume. All of which is happening while there is abundant research that links these dyes to creating or causing behavioral problems in children. But I mean, we turn a blind eye to it. And by the way, these dyes and additives, they're mainly derived from petroleum. You know what else is derived from petroleum aside from the fuel in your car and Jeff Bezos's jet fuel? Like plastic and kerosene and laundry detergent. I must say, petroleum is very versatile, but like food companies took that and they're like, if we make gummies red, we can convince children they're tasting the rainbow and mothers that they're giving their children a serving of strawberries. So kind of genius, but like evil genius. And finally, the FDA does a really poor job of testing for pesticide and pesticide residue. So in other countries, they generally do a good job of testing a lot of imported food. For us in 2020, we only tested about 1% of all imported food, even less than that, I believe. And we've found glyphosate, which is in some of the most widely used herbicides and pesticides in America and in imported foods. We found it in everything from boxed cereals to boxed wines in levels that exceed what is generally safe. And again, we turn a blind eye and send Katy Perry to space with that money, anyways. That's just coming up right now on like my feed, and it's just absolutely hilarious. But anyways, this conversation should be much longer, but we're going to move on to misinformation. Eat more, eat less, eat eggs, eggs are poisonous, eat meat, eat high carb, eat carnivore, eat whatever vor. Um, if you feel the whiplash from all of the nutrition information out there, you're not alone. But just remember that that confusion is there by design and not by accident. For decades, the food industry has been funding research that casts their products in favorable lights. And so, for example, in the 1960s, the sugar industry paid Harvard scientists to publish research that essentially downplays the association between high sugar consumption and heart disease and instead blame it on fat. And so, what we saw after that is a lot of Americans switched to a high sugar diet, low fat diet. And, well, a lot of them got diabetes. The dairy industry has done a similar thing with one of its most prominent campaigns, the Got Milk campaign. Almost everybody has heard of this campaign, and basically they've campaigned so hard that it is still in the USDA my plate recommendations as something essential for health, something essential for us to not develop osteoporosis, as though it is the only source of calcium or vitamin D in the entire world, and despite a lot of people having sensitivity or allergies to it. It's even in our food pyramids. It hasn't always been there because if you look at the United States history of food pyramids and recommendations, you can clearly see how it coincides with all of these different industries lobbying at different time periods. The meat industry did something similar where they funded research that essentially downplays the relationship between red meat consumption and cancer. And this was at the same time when the World Health Organization basically announced that they're calling red meat a group 1 carcinogenic, the same group as tobacco, and to which the meat industry responded with an aggressive campaign to just completely refute that. And it kind of worked. What can I say? Money makes America go round. You see, the issue here is that the USDA, who provides us nutritional advice, has a contradictory dual mission to promote American agricultural products and give us this nutritional advice, which is a conflict of interest for sure. But this stopped becoming about science a very long time ago. It is now about politics and, well, money, capitalism. And speaking of capitalism, now we're going to be talking about how the healthcare system, or rather, sick care system, profits off of us being chronically ill. This conversation requires an entire series of episodes to cover everything from big pharma to marketing to insurance companies, but for the sake of this episode, we're going to keep it short and sweet. The takeaway is that the US healthcare system profits when we're chronically ill but not dead. So the United States spends about $4 trillion annually on healthcare. That's 20% of our GDP. And yet we're still really sick and increasingly so. How is that? It's a really great question. You're just full of great questions today, aren't you? Well, it's possible because our healthcare system is not designed for health, it's designed for profit. Okay, so some of the most profitable diseases, the chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and other metabolic disorders, they're incredibly profitable and they're lifelong, which means that you can make money off of people till they die, basically. So let's take type 2 diabetes, for example. A patient with type 2 diabetes might need a glucose monitor, insulin, and regular doctor visits. The estimated lifetime cost for such patient it exceeds $85,000. 85, yeah, $85,000. I don't know why I glitched. $85,000 and can go much higher than that. And that's just one person out of millions and millions of people who receive care annually for diabetes. Meanwhile, preventative care, which is mainly nutrition knowledge, receives very minimal attention or funding. In fact, when doctors go to medical school, that whole 4 years, they just average out about 19 hours of nutrition education. And that should tell you something. Our doctors aren't trained to prevent illness, they're trained to prescribe medication. And you're like, why though? Well, because Big Pharma. Big Pharma is kind of behind most things. The pharmaceutical industry goes on and on about R&D, research and development, and how it costs so much money, but they actually spend twice as much on marketing than they do on research and development. So the next time someone tries to justify the high price of medication with R&D, you tell them they're lying. I don't know when you'd be having that conversation, but if you ever find yourself in that situation, you have this nice little factoid that you can throw in their face. In 2019, Americans saw an average of 9 drug ads per day. That's crazy, given that there's no other country in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise their medications on television. And yet, we see about 9 per day. And they're not necessarily advertising health, they're advertising a lifelong treatment for something that could have been prevented or even solved with dietary and lifestyle changes. If you think about it, it's really a perfect business model. American food policies make people sick, and then pharmaceutical companies hop in and treat them, not cure them, so that they can keep making this profit in this very vicious cycle. It is a genius business model, but a catastrophic public health issue. Just to give you an idea of how profitable this is, I gave you that example of one patient with type 2 diabetes exceeding a lifetime average cost of $85,000. So, how prevalent are these diseases? Well, according to the CDC, more than 40% of American adults are obese. Hypertension affects nearly half of all US adults, about 48%, which translates to 119.9 million people. Around 37.3 million Americans have diabetes, with the vast majority, 90% of them being type 2. Roughly 283,000 children and adolescents under the age of 20 are living with diabetes. And though it is less prevalent, the proportion of US children and adolescents with elevated blood pressure has been rising, particularly in those who are overweight or obese, which that number is also rising. And though it is sad, it is, as we discussed, incredibly profitable. In fact, it's so profitable, you might be wondering, why aren't other countries doing this? I wonder that too. But here's the thing, most other countries have a nationalized healthcare system. We in America have a patchwork system because division is kind of our MO. Everybody is separated, nobody works together, and nobody shares profit. Yay, capitalism. In countries like the UK, Canada, and Australia, they have something a little bit different. So the government essentially pays for when people get sick, so they have a vested interest in keeping people healthy. This means that they're going to subsidize healthier food, give people some kind of nutrition education, and ensure that their population is as healthy as can be so that they don't have to pay for their healthcare costs if they ever get sick. Well, in the hopes that no one ever gets sick, right? which is very different than the system we have, where the only way the pharmaceutical company can make profit is by making us sick, essentially. And there's no government oversight or interference with this whole matter. I mean, supposedly there are regulatory agencies like the FDA, but we just broke down how good they're doing their job. So as you can imagine, the FDA, USDA, CDC, they're not really doing as good as we want them to be doing. And right now their funding is being cut even more. They're understaffed, they're overburdened, and I mean, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. But let's not go there. Let's not go there. Okay, so we covered agricultural subsidies, the FDA and how good of a job it's doing. We covered a little bit of big pharma and the US healthcare system, and now it's time to come to big food. Beyond the billions of dollars the food industry contributes to ensuring that the policies work in their favor, they actually employ a world of food scientists to maximize what they call craveability, which is industry speak for addiction. These scientists precisely calibrate the amount of sugar, fat, and salt to maximize the flavor, the mouthfeel, everything for you to hit that bliss point. That's literally what they call it, the bliss point, where it triggers this need to consume more. In hyperpalatable foods, we see something called layering and loading, where they basically layer different kinds of fat and sugar to maximize your brain's dopamine response. And they actually have people hooked up to MRIs looking at their brain scans while they eat their products to see what's being lit up and to what extent. They also have focus groups, and they spend millions of dollars basically ensuring that when you take a bite of that chip, you're gonna reach in the bag for a lot more than that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I took a bite of chocolate or chips and I didn't really want any more, but I couldn't resist. It was like my body was fighting me. You know, on one hand, I was full, or I really just didn't need it, or didn't even like it that much. But on the other hand, my hand seemingly had a mind of its own and reached back into the bag to grab some more. And this is not by accident. Some former employees, like the former employee in Coca-Cola who came out and said, you know, the idea is to get you hooked. Or the I think it was a Lay's executive who said basically it is engineered to be addictive. Maybe that was the exact terminology. Maybe the word addictive was substituted for something different, but they themselves admit to this. And so it is no accident. It is there by design, and it's what's making us sick. And this is not even considering the cocktail effect of the sodium nitrate, the emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, BHA, BHT, all the other additives we're consuming. In fact, one study showed that an average American will consume 5 pounds over their lifetime of just additives. Just additives, just chemicals that disrupt your gut microbiome, increase your risk of cancer and metabolic disorders, hijack your brain and your hunger fullness signals, and so on and so forth. And just to give you an idea of how much this is an American problem, the EU has banned over 1,300 additives, while the United States has banned only 11. And this regulatory disparity isn't because, well, Americans are more immune to these additives. It's because the EU follows something called a precautionary regulation. And so if something has kind of the risk of making you sick, they will generally just ban it. While America is safe until proven guilty. You'd need an abundance of research to be presented so America can be like, actually, yeah, okay, we'll ban it. So we don't end up banning much. So to end, is the US government poisoning us? Kind of, sort of. It's not legitimately putting poison in our food, but it's doing a really poor job of protecting us from the food industries, pharmaceutical industries, and basically all the corporations who want to profit off of us being sick or consuming their really unhealthy products. So, US government, do better. And despite this bleak assessment, there is promise of, progression, and there are solutions. Many other countries have already implemented a lot of these solutions and have been incredibly successful. First and foremost, we need agricultural reform. We need our government to start directing its subsidies towards a variety of different foods, not just corn, soy, and wheat. Second, we need regulatory reform. We need the FDA to be more authoritative, more funded, and just better at really evaluating what's going into our food and what we should be able to consume volume and to what level. Third, we need transparency. We need food manufacturers to do front of cover warning signs, and we need them to put the information very transparently, obviously, and without any confusion or kind of using terms like natural flavors to include 11 different ingredients. Fourth, we need to address marketing, particularly to children. Other countries have restricted marketing junk food to children, and the United States could do the same. Fifth, we need to integrate nutrition into healthcare. We need to include nutrition as a bigger part of medical students' curriculum, and we need doctors to start talking about lifestyle and dietary changes long before they start talking about medication options. And finally, and this is a long shot, we need to democratize our food system. We need to have local food councils, community gardens, farm to school table initiatives. We need to give people power over their food. I mean, we can afford sending a bunch of celebrities up to space, apparently, so, you know. Capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. Capitalism. And also for the rest of us, we need to demoralize food. We need to change the way we think about our food choices. I see a lot of this on social media where people moralize food decisions or lifestyle decisions. And the fact of the matter is that most of these choices aren't really choices at all, right? Like most people don't have access to nutrition information, and even more people don't have access to nutritious foods. It's simply out of reach. I mean, things like Erewhon, Whole Foods, Wegmans, the grocery stores with more produce than packaged goods, those are not really things that normal people can go to. That's like the top 1%, but social media makes everything into a hyper reality. And now I'm going to go on a huge rant because it makes me very angry. But we've tied food choices to things like morality, desirability, work ethic, whether you're determined or lazy. And it's just so incredibly wrong. It's so incredibly unethical of us as society when we're all struggling under the same system to put other people down for something they can't really control. And so stop doing that if you can. We have to end on a tangent every single time. I'm Rania Salah. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Ish Matters. I had a lot of fun recording this. It's something I'm really passionate about. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, share with someone who really needs to hear this. Comment down below about what you want to hear next or just your general thoughts and opinions about the matter. Luna's fur is like everywhere. I can't wait to see you next time here on this channel. And Luna's gonna say bye. Bye, guys. Mwah. Now she has red lipstick on her. Ah!